Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored with Steve Taplin.
Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored, where tech leaders drop the filters and just tell it like it is. I'm your host, Steve Taplin, a serial technology entrepreneur who's launched 30 different companies, had 20 of those fail, but scaled 10 of those to success. And I turned that roller coaster of a ride into my book. It's called Fail Hard, Win Big. And this is where I teach you how to turn failure into your biggest competitive advantage and how custom software always played a pivotal and defining role in every win. Now I'm the CEO of Sonatify Technology. We are a software engineering firm with engineers in the US and Latin America. And today we are joined by Alex Pape, a guy who made his mark in the finance and wealth world on the private equity side, and then later turned to technology. Alex, welcome.
Steve, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here on the show.
All right. If you would, take a few minutes and walk our listeners through the journey of your career and how you ended up in your current role.
As you alluded to, I started my career quite far afield from a CTO role. I started in finance. I began my career in asset management. I was a stock picker. I spent the first couple of my years of my professional life studying companies, reading annual reports, building valuation models, thousands of them. And a couple of years in, I had an opportunity to pitch an idea to the company I was working at. It was a small asset management and media company in the Washington, D.C. area, to build a software business on top of their media business. I didn't know anything about that at that time. I just saw what I thought was an opportunity to offer digital financial advice to a broader array of clients than could be served. The board liked that idea and said, yeah, we should do that. You should do that, Alex. And I didn't have any background in technology, but they said, if you don't do it, then the company's not going to pursue it. So they gave me a small team and set me loose. And I think from that opportunity, I just fell in love with operating businesses, much more so than the academic side of studying and trying to value businesses as an investment professional. And since then, I've spent all of my career as a builder, and I've really tried to use technology as like a weapon to change the trajectory or the physics of a business. So after that switch over, I spent about a decade in asset management and wealth management technology startups here in the US, also in Hong Kong and some other parts of Southeast Asia. And then I actually ran a hedge fund for a few years to bounce back over and keep that skill set fresh. And then in 2017, I was hired by BlackRock. They had acquired a Silicon Valley startup that was a robo-advisor, digital advisor at the time. And they wanted some help to figure out what to do with that business at the scale that a company like BlackRock operates. I joined them and ended up building out a large enterprise software business serving wealth managers and private banks at BlackRock. So I got to build a large scale global enterprise.
BlackRock doesn't do anything small.
No, BlackRock was a very interesting learning curve for me. Coming from the startup scene where you're always looking for your wedge. How do you enter a market with one kind of narrow value prop that gives you your entry? Not how a company like BlackRock thinks. BlackRock thinks about what field can I own? And so it was a very different way to think about building a business. And so I stayed at BlackRock for 8 years. That was the first time I got to hold the CTO title. I was the CTO for their separately managed account business, so building individual portfolios for high net worth clients. And then just this past February, I jumped over to Assetmark, which is my current role as Chief Product and Technology Officer here. And Assetmark is an independent wealth platform that is for independent financial advisors. So financial advisors that are not tethered to a bank or a broker and are looking for a platform to help them with their investments and their technology needs.
I love your story, Alex. Unconventional path to get to where you are. And I would have loved to have been in that pitch where your first company that you pitched the software product and they said yes, because obviously you did your research, you had a passion for it, and they gave you a team to build it. And sounds like you've had some phenomenal experiences and a hell of a ride.
And in a lot of ways, I'm very grateful to that and kudos to them. And I've really tried to pay it forward because they really just took a gamble on what it was a 24-year-old who had a business idea but didn't have any technology credentials to back him up. And that fortunately seemed to have paid off for them. It changed the trajectory of my career, but it actually influences a lot about how I think about building teams today and thinking about how do we give almost outlandish stretch assignments to junior and earlier career people because some of them can do it. And like, that's how people grow. And I think I have a big belief that people can grow much faster than traditional career ladders can enable if you can create the right environment, the right incentives, and just give them an opportunity to do so.
I love it. Now, your current title is Chief Technology and Product Officer, not just CTO. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think I grew up when I came into technology, I really grew up with the product management track as sort of my heritage. And I had I had a financial and commercial background. I like to say that I learned by suffering. I learned to build my technical chops and credentials, but I always very focused on how do we have a highly commercial strategy that we're backing with technology, and how do we have a highly commercial strategy that we are executing with technology in a way that others couldn't follow who don't have the same ability and willingness to invest in software. And so it became very natural to me to want to have engineers and product managers commingled in a common organization. I always found it
What a
odd.
crazy concept. Aren't they supposed to fight and hate each other?
I always found it jarring and odd and jarring that you'd have completely separate divisions in some companies. And like, lots of companies get this right, but a lot of companies don't. And they keep them quite separate. You have a product team or a digital team over here, and you have a engineering team over here, and like, they're oil and vinegar, they don't mix. And that didn't make any sense to me. So I always thought, you should have them combined. Here, we actually call the team Prod Eng. It's product and engineering, but we always shorten it to Prod Eng. And it's symbolic. It's supposed to mean that product management and engineering are points on a spectrum. They're not discrete disciplines. They should have significant overlap in what the two can do. And for me personally, my career journey, when I was considering my next role, I really insisted on having a joined title. I think this is the right way to structure. And I think that when I'm moved on from this role and whatever I do next years from now, the firm should fill it with another CPTO. This is the right way to structure it, Mike.
Alex, I have to laugh. Just this past week, I was in a whiteboarding meeting with a client, and you had the chief technical officer on one side, the chief product officer on the other, and they were both very angry. And they were doing a modernization project, and the chief product officer had his idea what to do. Everybody's complaining why the CTO hadn't had it done. And at the end of the day, they weren't communicating well. And it was treated completely separate. And it was like they need a mediator to bring them together. And I just tell that story. Like, I'm a big believer of that joined role and joined title, because if the product side and the engineering side don't work hand in hand, they hate each other, and it's unproductive.
And there are 2 points on a spectrum is the best way that I think about it. You also don't want to change information flow between the two of them. I think that's one of the biggest problems if you keep them separate. Like, you want your engineers to go talk to clients and be there when you do user test your product in front of users. You want your product managers to see what the core technical challenges are. You want them supplying credible challenge to each other. Engineers supplying challenge to commercial decisions, and product managers supplying challenge to architectural decisions. Now, what I just said puts a lot of burden on the talent profiles and the talent training that you expect of those two roles. But I think if you can get that right, I've gotten it right a few times in my career and hope to get it right some more times in my career. It's a beautiful thing. It's the boys in the boat rowing it in a way that's fitting with some of the parts.
I think that was well said. And I would argue, how do you break new ground? How do you create new user experiences? How do you make sure your products are customer first and built that way without those things in sync? So I absolutely love it.
We talk about our products all the time. As a CTO, you're always talking about what is it that you're building. But the reality is that you're building more so than your product is you're building a machine that can generate products. And that machine is your team. And your team is made up of people. And people are craftspeople. Like you want the best craftspeople organized in the best way. And so really most of what your job is creating the environment and the incentive structures and the processes to have that machine operate as well as possible. That's really the mindset that I take. And we're going through a major team overhaul here in the last few months, which we're happy to talk about. But it's really like that set of principles of, yes, you're building a product, but more importantly, you're building a machine that generates products.
I love it. Now, Alex, you have an impressive background, but how did you land your current position? Did you apply on LinkedIn? Did you know somebody? You have a very impressive background, but I always like to talk about how people are getting their roles. That's something people are always interested because last time I checked, just applying online doesn't do it.
I think very few roles I think are filled online. And I say that as somebody who's hired hundreds, if not thousands of these roles over the last decade. I think we fill very few through online, although it happens occasionally. Look, I think for me, I'm very thesis driven in my thinking, and that applies to my own career as well. And so the last few years I was sitting in BlackRock and I was watching things that were happening in my market. My market is the wealth management and the asset management markets. And what I was seeing were more and more clients want personalized portfolios. They want their portfolio to be a reflection of their own values and their own unique needs. And they didn't want cookie cutter. And they also, I was also watching more and more financial advisors want to outsource the management of portfolios. And those two things were really at odds with each other in this market. Because if an advisor wanted to offer a personalized portfolio, they have to do it themselves. If they want to outsource it, they would have to choose from a limited cookie cutter menu in the way that this market is set up. And so I had this thesis that if you could build a platform that allowed advisors to outsource portfolios and in the process have them be more personalized than they could have been themselves, that would be a winning value proposition. So I actually went searching for what I thought would be a business that could supply that offering. And Assetmark was the closest business that I found to that. They've been around for 25 years. We have $150 billion of under management and about 12,000 advisors. I just give those stats because to me, it evidenced that they had secured initial product market fit. There were advisors that were using the platform that were fans. And I thought this is a great place to build out that next vision. And I got to say, I got lucky in the sense that this company was publicly traded and just got taken private 12 months ago. And the vision I just outlined turned out to be very similar to that the new private equity owners offered for the business. And so we were able to get connected and quickly just see eye to eye. And it just lined up.
I like that a lot, though. You created your thesis for the market and kind of went shopping to place it. That's a great concept of coming in from a thought leadership perspective versus applying for a job.
I think that for different people that doesn't always apply, but particularly for more senior roles, I think you got to have a view on where the market's going. And if you're verticalized, it's sort of a bit more natural because you've got particular expertise and opinions on your market. But I think it applies to people who are in horizontal tech as well. You still have an opinion about what you think is going to be a meaningful next splash that you want to be a part of. And those are the conversations that employers want to have.
Yeah, I love it. Well, talk about some current projects you're working on and how you're changing the game in your industry.
One of the things that we're working on right now that I'm very excited about, and also candidly is one of the hardest things to work on, is we're bringing private market investments down into the wealth market channel. So historically, private markets, think about investing in private equity, venture capital, private real estate, has really been like the domain of institutional investors and the ultra wealthy. But what's happened over the last decade or two is that much more of the market is actually in private assets. So the Wilshire 5000, which is sort of a good measure of like most of the publicly traded stocks in the US, actually doesn't even have 5,000 stocks anymore. It has less than 4,000 stocks. There are not enough stocks to fill it up. The number of stocks, publicly traded stocks, is shrinking. If you look at the number of companies that have over $100 million in revenue, over 80% of those are private now, which is a big change from the past. And
that's an interesting stat.
A lot of the good investments are happening in the private realm. And so making those available to financial advisors to in turn make available to their clients is an important thing for our industry. But it's also a super hard problem to solve because the tech for private markets and the tech for wealth management grew up independently, and they really don't mix. So we're taking on what I find to be very fun but very hard work of building technology that allows you to mix private markets and publicly traded stocks, mutual funds, bonds in the same portfolio. And we'll wrap it all together for you. We'll trade it and really make all the complexity of the private markets invisible to the advisor and the client. And so I'm very excited. We're launching our first version of that in November. And I think that it's going to be both a great thing for investors, but also a great thing for our business to be able to differentiate and offer something that most of the market can't offer.
I love it. And unfortunately, one of my ventures that was one of my failures was a REIT that I tried to take public, started off as a privately traded REIT, and understand that world more than most, and the need for good platforms to make those private type investments available. So that's exciting. And certainly the current administration is pushing for this as well.
There is a regulatory tailwind for sure. I think there's a recognition um, by the industry, but also by government of the problem I just laid out. We want investors to be able to have access to the market, the parts of the market that are going to supply returns. And if that shifts to the privates, we've got to make it available to them. And so there is regulatory change that's helping. We're dropping rules that make it easier for less wealthy people to access these fund types. There's a rule that's been floated to make it possible to potentially put some of these in a 401k directly, which would make them available to a lot more people. And so I see that as indications to us that we're working on something that's in the right path. But there's still just a lot of hard technology and really software problems to solve of, okay, how do you mix things that don't account the same way? They can't put them in the same statement. I can't build a proposal that shows the value of the privates and the publics next to each other.
Right.
These things are really oil and vinegar today. So combining them requires a rewrite of the entire technology stack of a wealth manager to make it work.
Well, it sounds like a big elephant to get there, and you got to do it one bite at a time. But sounds like a fun project.
I think we're trying to bite off maybe like a whole leg to start and then spoon our way from there. But I buy your analogy.
So tell me about your software engineering team and your work model, how you go about leading the team.
We have a team of a little bit north of 400 people in what I call product and engineering, or prod eng. And it's really organized around 4 core disciplines. So we have engineering, product management, design, and QA engineering. And we've really very intentionally built up the career paths of each of those. Some of those career paths are actually lateral and intentionally move across each other. We're a global team. We are in the San Francisco Bay Area, where our headquarters are in the East Bay, which is where I am now. We have a significant presence in Charlotte and also in Atlanta, and we have a significant India presence as well. But our core philosophy is just we should have multidisciplinary, persistent teams. So small teams of each of those 4 disciplines together that permanently own a slice of our platform. And our platform is a wealth management platform. So, for example, a team that owns all of our portfolio management technology, all of our client reporting technology, all of our model management technology, and so on. And those people become really deep experts in those. And we really look to those teams to bottom up propose to us the best ways to set the roadmap and evolve the features for their areas. From a team standpoint, I joined in February and have been building out this team significantly since then. I have a really strong philosophy that if you have created a really good environment for developers and for each of these disciplines, then you should also naturally be very good at talent development. And the way you should exercise that skill is you should go hire lots of younger, earlier career people and groom them. And so we're just beginning that now. We've hired 30, 35 people in the junior engineering ranks, mostly in Charlotte the last few months. And we built out training programs and accelerator programs internally to let the best practitioners advance more quickly here than we think that they could anywhere else.
And are your engineers, are they remote? Are they hybrid? Are they on site?
We run hybrid, so we're 3 days a week in the office. We put a lot of thought into time zone location. So while we got 400 people and a lot of structuring to the team, any given team, we only limit it to 2 compatible time zones. So for example, it's Charlotte and India, or Charlotte and Atlanta. We avoid at all costs the West Coast to India cross, which is
Which is painful.
just hard to make that math work and make lives enjoyable with that split. So we try very carefully to have teams limited to 2 compatible locations, and then have them in the office for the more collaborative parts of the job, and then work from home the other 2 days.
Gotcha. Excellent. I appreciate you sharing that. So, as a tech leader, that we're now in Q4 of 2025, what's the biggest challenge you're facing now?
We're living through a period of rapid change in what constitutes the best way to build software. I don't remember having this much debate and challenge on what is a really good SDLC anytime in the last 2 decades as right now. And it's because of AI. And it's because, so what is an AI native SDLC? What's the right way to do it? How do you adapt it to your business? And I'm a really big believer in making bets and then seeing those bets through. And so um, it takes discipline right now to not experiment with every new tool and idea that comes out, because they're coming out daily, weekly.
Yeah.
Look, we're technologists. It's hard not to be addicted to following that news and like just want to go check everything out, but you can't do that. Like you have to have a discipline to have a thesis for which ones are most applicable to you, and then do a long enough experiment to actually see it through and then use it at enterprise scale. But at the same time, you don't want to miss something important. And so you have to keep a watchful eye and run some experiments, but not all. I'd say that's the hardest thing right now, to get that balance right of, should you use Cursor? Should you use Copilot? Should you use the long list of these? For sure, some of these are the right answer and are game changing and are applicable to our business, but you can't experiment every single one of them. So you have to pick your bets, and then try to learn as much as you can from the bets that others are making around you at the same time.
It's no doubt. And every time you're like, man, I like this tool. It only does this. If it would only do that, but the next version of another tool is supposed to do it, that's a daily or weekly thing in our world at this point. So I like how you put that it takes discipline to not try every tool. That is definitely a thing. Now, within your engineering and product side, are there AI tools that you guys have integrated that you're really liking at the current moment?
We've organized our AI strategy into 3 buckets. So we've said AI for ourselves, AI for the prod eng team. How do we make ourselves better? AI for the rest of the company. How do we supply AI tools to other functions, to our investment team, our sales team, and really think of that as our responsibility to curate for them. And then AI for our actual product. So the AI for actual product is actually the one that I think is the furthest along at the moment. And if you think about the core of what a financial advisor does, is they have a relationship with an end client. That relationship is one of trust and one of giving them ideally the best, most objective, most holistic advice. But that comes down to conversations. And the current generation of LLM tools are extremely good at crafting and guiding conversations. And so we've done a lot of work to use AI to create what we call talk tracks for advisors. So help an advisor figure out, which client should I talk to today? What should I talk about? How should I frame that conversation? And as the portfolios that they're managing get more and more complicated, as they include those private market assets, which are not simple, they're important, but they're not easy to grok. What we found is that we can use AI really well to give us a talk track, and you can tune the talk track to the sophistication level of the client. You can do it out of the box. So I think that's been really fun to use AI for the actual product and start to differentiate. We've got really good feedback in our early tests of that with our advisor base.
How do you control the AI hallucinations in that scenario and trust that the advisor realizes that AI might be going down the wrong track?
It's a great question, and it's the first question that almost every advisor asks us. I think in this case, it's a bit aligned. It's easy to align with what the advisor wants. So most advisors, they want to be the face of the relationship with the client. They don't want to be intermediated by anybody, including technology. So the first principle is just the AI is only ever for the advisor. We don't ever go straight to the end client and say something that potentially contradicts what the advisor would say. So there's naturally a human in the loop, which is the advisor who is our client. And then we're being very careful not to use AI to actually generate advice. Generating conversations is different than generating advice. So how do I explain the advice that the advisor's already crafted? How do I explain the performance in the portfolio that we agreed to a year ago and now has gone through a tariff war and a government shutdown? And how does that affect my portfolio? Like those are good things to help, for AI to help, that are a bit more removed from the risk of potentially generating bad advice or potentially generating something that goes to a client that the advisor wouldn't see. We just sort of naturally don't do those. Our clients don't want us to.
Gotcha. That's a good way of segmenting it. So, Alex, you've done a lot in your career. I know you've barely scratched the surface of what you will do, but what are some brutal lessons that you know now that you wish you would have learned earlier in your career?
Early in my career, so shortly after I moved out of asset management and into my first role building a software product, that software product had almost immediate success. I'm sure, Steve, if you've ever experienced like immediate success, you get overconfident.
Yes.
And the next product I launched was the inverse of that. I built a product that was an investor education product. This is 15, 20 years ago. And I had a big launch event for it. We had a live streaming video on a major media property. We spent a lot of time and money. And it was a huge flop. Nobody bought it. It totally failed. And when I went back and looked at it, a lot of people, as we batted around this idea, told us that they would love to learn. Yes, most people would like to learn more about investing and be better at it, but they really are too busy to do that. What they really just want is better investments, and they want it fed to them. So the tagline that I often say to my team is that market risk exceeds tech risk, which is just a way of saying that the risk that nobody wants what we build is almost always greater than the risk that we're not capable of building it. So market risk exceeds tech risk. I think that early experience, and I've had more failures. I've had to learn that lesson more than once, but that one has always stuck with me. And I feel like I try to embed that in people who join our team. And if I could spread that across the broader CTO community, I would love to.
You know, unfortunately, and my whole book is really about this, you don't learn as much from your successes as you do your failures. Because when everything just comes together and goes perfect and you have a big win, you almost think it's too easy. And you get overly confident, you get cocky, you think you're invincible. And my gosh, the failures are where you really learn those lessons. And, I talk about, hey, we're all human. You're allowed to get upset over a failure, but give yourself 24, 48 hours, whatever it takes. Go for a run, hit a punching bag, get it out. And then what did you learn from that? And I think the power of learning how to take those failures and turn them into successes is the best superpower that any of us can have.
I couldn't agree more. I used the phrase earlier, learning through suffering. And I think maybe that's a personality trait of mine, but I do feel like the surest path to a good idea is usually via a bad idea. And the more reps you can get through that, the more lessons you learn and the more good ideas you'll end up with.
I love it. And it's kind of funny. One of my good buddies is a retired baseball player. And I told him I had this idea of a book I'm writing, but I'm like, do I really want to write that I had 20 businesses fail? And he's like, Steve, you said you had 30 businesses, 20 failed, 10 succeeded. In baseball, you'd have a 333 batting average and you'd be in the Hall of Fame. He's like, so like slapping me in the head to look at it from a different perspective.
I love that. Coming out of the investment world, most great investors are actually wrong more than 50% of the time. It's just that their wins massively outstrip their losses. And I feel like coming out of that world, it's a very similar philosophy. And the idea that you're going to get it all right every time is not realistic, but also it's not a worthwhile goal. It's not how the world works.
I'm with you. Well, Alex, thank you so much for getting uncensored with us today. You brought up some amazing points of knowing your industry, knowing your niche. how you created a thesis and essentially shopped it versus applying for jobs. And I love your perspective on the combined chief technical and product officer role. Excited to see what you build and what you continue to build throughout your career. Before we wrap, Alex, what's some no BS advice you have for other tech leaders out there who are trying to build, scale, or just survive in these interesting times?
I think that the job of leading the technology portion of a business really boils down to two things. Know what hill to take and be good at taking hills. And I think that it's important for anybody to know where you stand on your ability to do those two things at your org at any given time. Because you need to be able to do both of them. And if you're really good at building your way out of any problem, it's not going to do you any good if you don't know what problem is worth solving. And if you know what problem's worth solving, it doesn't matter if you're not good at solving problems. So I tend to often just think about, I'm constantly assessing how good are we at knowing what to do? How good are we at doing stuff? And I think if you like organize your world that way, it creates a lot of clarity in terms of what you got to do next.
Great advice. Thank you, Alex. That's it for this episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm Steve Taplin. If you enjoyed the show, go ahead and hit subscribe. If you didn't enjoy it, well, I'm going to work with Alex. We're going to build some models to crash your portfolio, or we'll just share it with your competitors. It might be the edge they're looking for. Remember to fail hard, win big, and always build what matters. See you next time. That's a wrap. Another great episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun doing this show. I love talking with great tech leaders. As a side note, if you're interested, check out my new book, Fail Hard, Win Big. This is the story of how I built 30 companies, failed on 20, and turned 10 into multi-million-dollar wins. The common thread with all of them was custom software. Also, if you need software development help out there, my company, Sonatify Technology, we deliver world-class software development engineers out of Latin America. We have a solid track record of helping companies launch better products and faster. Thanks again for listening. Appreciate it and appreciate you.